logistics, and I think we'll jump in. So we'll just roll call. I'm Megan Roy. I'm chair of the commission and member of the communication subcommittee. Jeff Fannin, you're the first on my screen.
Jeff Fannin, Vermont NEA, and good morning. I'm half awake. Sorry.
Oliver.
Yeah, good morning. Oliver Olson. I'm the Vermont Independent Schools Association appointee.
Thanks. John Castle.
Yep. Good morning, everybody. John Castle, Executive Director for the Vermont Rural Education Collaborative.
And Jay.
Good morning, everybody. Also a member of the Education Subcommittee, Jay Nichols. I'm the representative for the Vermont Principals Association.
Great. Thank you. We do have one member of the public, so we'll give an opportunity at the beginning and the end of the meeting. We're a small group right now. This is definitely a work session, so I think we can be pretty informal, try to monitor the meeting to see if other folks come on. Essentially, our agenda, I'll just do a quick review, ask if there's anything else we need to add. It really is a work session on developing a draft of the communication and engagement plan. It would be a draft and it would go to the full commission at our meeting on the 9th. So having something to present to them is a hard deliverable, but obviously it's a draft and it's for them to consider. And then I thought we would do a quick check-in on our next meeting date. We had tentatively set aside the third Monday of the month, but we can confirm that. Is there any adjustments to that agenda, committee members? All right, great. So I will, John Clifford, you are our member of the public. If you would like an opportunity to address the committee now, you are welcome to, but not obligated. Don't want to put you on the spot.
And you're on mute if you're trying to speak.
Okay. I'm gonna keep our conversation going, John. Obviously, if you can raise your hand or turn your camera on if you did intend to speak, and then there will be a chance at the end of the meeting as well. All right. So again, very work-focused meeting. I wanted to give us something to start with. So just sort of created a document that is by no means what we have to end with. But I'll just kind of talk about what I put in here, and then I think we'll just open up the conversation and go from there. The things that I wanted to capture based on the full commission's conversation.
Megan,
Yes.
Can you share screen as you walk us through it? I know there's only one member of the public,
Yep.
but it's much easier for them to know what we're talking about.
Yes, I think I can. Let me see.
Okay.
Yep.
I don't know how to do it in Teams, but.
Nope, I do have hold on, I have to tell my computer to share. Just a second. Okay. Maureen, I have a message that my computer is giving me saying I may not be able to record the contents of my screen until I restart my computer. I hope that it's not a problem on your end, but just so you know.
I probably won't know until the end, but thank you. I'll
Okay.
be watching for that.
Okay. Let's see. Can you all see my screen?
Yep. And did we lose Jay Nichols?
No, I'm here.
Oh, okay.
One of me's still here. Thanks for checking out.
We don't have any video, so I don't know if that was by design or if there's a problem on your end.
No, my camera's on.
We see you, but you're frozen, Jay.
Oh.
You're not awkwardly frozen though, so.
All right, well, I'm here. I can hear you and see you all fine. I don't know what the issue is, so I'm just going to stick with it.
Okay. I question for the group. Do you see me? Do you see us and something behind the screen, or are you just seeing the
Yeah,
communication
I
plan?
think you're sharing your entire desktop
All right.
rather than just the, yeah.
I'm going to
There-
minimize that. Just so you know, I can't see all of you, so just talk. I won't be able to see your hand raised. So just really quick, what I was trying to capture from the conversation of the committee is the committee talked about three different, well, I collapsed it into three different three different elements of communication. There may be more. These also kind of match sort of your typical levels of engagement and communication. But the commission talked a lot about information sharing with the purpose of educating and how important it'll be for folks engaging in the process to have a really clear understanding of the issue, the data. So there's sort of a purpose of educating. Obviously, there's listening and learning and gathering information. So the commission talked about, given our timeline, we're going to have to capitalize on other opportunities that are going on around us and leveraging those as data sources. So if other groups and organizations are having events and we can benefit from that. So that's sort of the listening and learning piece. And then obviously just engagement is really partnering and influencing with various members of the group. Then we talked, I'll just go all the way through, and then I'm gonna actually stop sharing my screen so I can see folks, because this is just meant to tell you what I wrote down. It's not anything more than that. We did talk about the potential of accessing consultants for this work. And so I wanted to talk about that a little bit. I tried to capture some of the things that came up in the commission. I believe we need a really deep focus on equity-focused community engagement and bringing in some expertise that can support us and the full commission, potentially even to refine the plan that we are drafting. We want to make sure that strategies exist that achieve those objectives, but also match the objective to the outcome. Like what's the outcome of the engagement that we're having? Potentially expertise and consultation in actually facilitating community conversations and focus groups. And then there's this idea that came up in a full commission meeting about training and toolkit materials, because members of the commission, if they are going into other spaces or opportunities, to be able to have a roadshow of sorts so that they can facilitate communication. So those are some potential things that the group talked about. And then without going into a lot of detail here, because I know we'll come back to it, this is just a very skeleton, that idea of what is the event or group or activity that we're trying to focus on? What's the purpose of that? What strategies might the commission use? And then two things that I've found helpful in other development of communication plans is who is this reaching, but who might it miss? And what do we do about that? And what this is preloaded with on the left is what is written in the law. So these are groups or individuals that we are required to engage with. Obviously, and then it looks like I also did add the various education organizations and then lots of blank spaces, because I would anticipate that we need to flesh that out.
And I'll note you missed Vermont and EA, but that's all right.
Sorry, Jeff.
That's all right. And there are a couple others that I would add too.
Yes, that is exact. I'm sorry for not putting them on the preloaded version, but yes, I would expect that's part of what today is. So I'm stopping to share just so I can see you all, because I wanted to start with just something to offer. Oliver, I think I saw your hand.
Yeah, thanks. So I think this is a really good start, Megan. And my only suggestion is whenever I hear a plan, I think of something with, dates and milestones. And I don't think it's appropriate at this time to get into dates and milestones. So I would maybe perhaps recharacterize this as a communications strategy or a communications framework, just so we don't set the wrong expectations. And then that should be what we present to the full commission. And then we come back and actually it's going to take some time to work out an actual plan.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think you're right. I think this is really about how do we organize ourselves?
Yep.
John.
Thanks. I've got a lot to share today about some of this. And I agree in some regards, Oliver, but at the same token, I do think we have to think of this as a backward design. And we need to think about, the full scope of our time as a commission and how to utilize that time. So I do think some benchmarks or some time that we need to plan out, like this is a window of time in which this kind of engagement is going to happen, or this is a window. I do think the full commission needs to hear that, to look at that scope. I agree with you that some of this we can't plan out in total detail, and talking about the broad brushstrokes and the overarching goals, I think are important with the full commission first. But I do think giving them some sense of a scope and sequence would be helpful. The other thing that I would say related to this is, I know there was some discussion at our meeting earlier this week about establishing overarching principles. So I think that needs to be kept in mind. So there are principles about our work as a commission that are related to communication and engagement, like transparency or authentic engagement, things that are really the core of our work. And I know I shared a document with you this morning, Megan, and I forgot that our chat would be turned off because I was going to drop it in the chat for the committee, but I don't know whether that's something that you can share with folks at some point. But I do think it's a tool that I've used, and it's certainly been provided in some of the training I've had around public engagement. But I do think looking at some core ideas around this work, I think, are really important. And I think some of what you shared initially about the, informing and sharing and then listening and learning and engaging, I hope we can have a robust conversation about how to flesh that out as well.
Mhm.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, John. Two quick things related to that. I only just opened your document, and it reminded me, so I will forward that to the group. It's a like a guiding document on principles of engagement with communities. And I also would add, I've had the opportunity to work with Great Schools Partnership, and there are other organizations that do this. This isn't really about them, but they have a pretty good toolkit on equitable communication, equitable community engagement. So really focusing on lifting voices. And we've heard a lot about that. So at the end of the meeting, I'll share both of those resources and anything else that people forward. And the other thread I wanted to pick up that you brought up, John, kind of about the balance between framework and plan. One of the things that I do want to make sure we spend some time with today is those community conversations in each county, because I do think I have some thoughts around the September meeting. And if there is, I think it is natural to plan a community conversation in each of the counties so that we are not just holding our commission meeting. Like there should be I think the intention of the legislation is not just to rotate the meeting location so that it looks like we are around the state. I think we could partner that. So I do want to make sure that we get some level of specificity for that piece. Jay, go ahead.
You said part of what I was going to say, so I'll say the part that you didn't say. So I agree with Oliver and John, actually, kind of like splitting the difference. I think we need to have, like Oliver said, more of a framework or a construct or whatever you want to call it. That's going to lead ultimately to a specific plan. I think we come back with some type of a overarching plan that we bring to the full group at their next meeting. And I think we should then develop a plan that has some flexibility built into it, so that if opportunities come for an opportunity to do some type of event in Bennington that's already going to be packed with people, that we try to take advantage of that if we can. And then secondly, building off what John said, I do think a guiding document or a set of values or priorities that is approved by the commission at large is going to be key to our work on this commission or this subcommittee, as well as the financial subcommittee. So having that taken, hopefully being part of September 9th meeting, try to flush that out a little bit so that we're all working from that central moral purpose, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, I was thinking as that comment was coming up about there are several 10,000-foot conversations that I think we need to have as a full commission. We keep using the term guiding principles. We're talking about it today related to what we believe about engagement, but I think we also have overarching guiding principles about how we're going to make our decisions as a commission. So I think that's one of the things as we plan the agenda for the 9th, really having a good way of having that conversation, frankly, a structured way of having that conversation. So what would be the most helpful for us? I think the couple things I heard is let's dive in a little bit to those. I mean, on this draft, they're called objectives. I'm going to pause, actually. Jeff, go ahead.
First, I think Oliver had his hand up before I did, so he was raising it, doing the old-fashioned way. Like I always do. So
But
go
Jeff
for it,
hasn't
Oliver.
spoken yet, so I'll let Jeff go first, then I'll go after him.
Well, I may be taking us a step backwards, and so maybe that's not great. But as I look at the law, and maybe that's, I'm the lawyer here, and as I look at the law, in particular the public engagement, the 3 paragraphs there, I want to make sure that we're all on the same page about this, because I think and I forget who it was now. I was looking at the law and I wasn't paying attention to who was speaking, but I think it was you, Megan, who said 14 meetings we're required to have. And I think we genuinely should have public engagement and interaction and, back and forth, if you will, there, and not just sort of sit there, as a slate. So that's kind of my thinking, but I want to, hear from others as they do it. Do they agree? I don't know, as I look at the law and there's some public engagement requirements, I'll call it that we've got to follow as a commission. And I look to that as sort of guiding us a little bit. And as to whether we put dates or not, I don't get there yet. I'm first like, how do we do this consistent with the law? That's what so my thought is, can we just take a quick glance at the law itself, the words on the page?
Mm-hmm. Oliver, and then John.
Yeah, I would agree with Jeff. We should, make sure that we're clearly aligned with the law. The other thing is, I think just in general, those community conversations really should be the milestones that anchor a lot of what we do. I think that's going to be the most important thing that we do from a communications and engagement perspective. And as I'm thinking about it logistically, and going back to John's point about sort of starting at the end and working back, if we're designing this in such a way that we're going to basically put these at the end of our meetings in each county, I think it really disadvantages whatever communities are, at meeting 15 and 16, right? Because the commission will have already gotten through the bulk of its work and decision making by that point. So it's not really truly going to be engaging for those communities. So I think we need to be thinking about how we, and back to the principles of being inclusive and equitable in our approach. We need to think about how we design those community conversations in such a way that there's meaningful, authentic engagement from the public that's going to inform our work. And that means we need to front load a lot of those conversations, I think.
Thanks, Oliver. John?
Yep, I think that's a great point, Oliver. I think we all know that our task is pretty daunting, right? How do we do all of this work in a timeline that we have, but also, you're right, there's this whole progression. How much information will we have? In some ways, we could shortchange groups in the beginning, right? Because they don't have all the information. We could shortchange groups in the end because they're not giving as much input. So, I think that's something to be sensitive to. A couple of quick points that I wanted to make about, I think the sort of the preamble and that information sharing. I'll get into that, but I think there was a question about the actual law. So I have that right here in front of me. And it says public engagement, the commission shall conduct not fewer than 14 public meetings to inform the work required under this section, at least one meeting of the commission as a whole or subcommittee to be held in each county. So I think those are two different things, but I do think they can be the same thing, right? And I think we talked a little bit about that on Monday. I really feel it's incredibly important that those community meetings are a chance to listen and learn, right? Certainly, there's no question that a lot of our efforts need to be informing the public and giving them information, but I think we have to be careful that we're not going out selling something or lecturing people. It's, listening to people, I think, is incredibly important in this process. And I think that, shows up a little bit in that document. I know, Megan, you have sort of, which groups would we be listening and learning and which groups we would be, informing. And I think the reality is all those groups, right? We need to listen and learn to all the groups. We need to inform all the groups. And ultimately, hopefully there's a level of engagement and partnership and influencing as we progress in that work. Another point back to what Jeff said, and I just partly this is about our disposition as a commission. And this is tricky to thread the needle on this. And I fully get it and understand it. Having tried to help boards navigate things as a superintendent for 13 years in 2 different locations, I know public comment, right, in a meeting is different, right, than public discourse, right, public engagement. At the same token, I think we have to be careful of that forum that we currently have being a dead end, right? Because I think sometimes people only want to make a comment, and that's fine, but I think other times people are asking questions. And I think we need to have some mechanism in which we can respond to those questions. And I get it. I mean, we don't want people to hijack the meetings. We don't, it's the commission's work. It's the commission's meeting, which is a public meeting, which is different than a public forum, right? I get all of that. But at the same time, I think we want to demonstrate to the public that we are interested in hearing from them and that their questions are meaningful. And so some feedback loop, it can be the next meeting, I understand, right? But I just think we want to think about the overall disposition of how we are presenting ourselves and engaging the public, because ultimately, this is going to be the hardest thing that we do, is how do we actually increase public trust in our work through public engagement, right? As opposed to diminishing that. And if we shut people off, I worry that we're going to be perceived as this has been just a charade, right? That we're engaging people because it said we needed to engage people, but we're not really interested in listening. So that's a hard thing to figure out in an effective way. I get it, but I think we just need to be mindful of that.
Yeah, I'll just, if I could respond to some of that. I agree wholeheartedly. I think it's why I think this conversation and this committee is holding some of the most important work. And frankly, the things that I hear, because they often come to me, is and it's why I commented the way I did at the start of Monday's meeting, is I'm restating the obvious, but there's more than skepticism on the part of many community members in writ large and from all different perspectives. And so the most important thing that we can do is lift public trust and balance that with an ability to do work, which is really difficult given the magnitude of what the task is. I'm kind of just restating and agreeing with what you're saying, John. A couple of things, though, that I also think to be true is, one, we have only really had 2 commission meetings and a steering group meeting, maybe 2. So I think establishing a cadence with an opportunity to share the work of subcommittees, frankly, there could be a standing agenda item that is a follow-up from public comment. I just wrote down a running frequently asked questions document, because some of the questions that have come up or comments are repeated. There's always going to be tension, because I can tell you I've received some very uncharitable emails, and we're not going to, I want to be careful about setting up a expectation that every single comment Frankly, some of them we wouldn't be making public because of some of the language. So it's a tricky balance. I'm kind of just affirming that. It made me also want to talk. This is a funny commission because of the structure of the steering group, the chair, subcommittees. The steering group is, frankly, I need that group to help plan the agenda, especially for some of these conversations. And so this agenda cadence, I'd like to have that group also kind of, as they build the agenda, affirm how are we reacting to and bringing the public comment out. So it's just another layer. Oliver and then Jay.
Yeah, I just want to second all of John's comments. That when I was looking at that public engagement section, it initially had it focused on sort of information sharing, and I think we need to do that. But I think the most important thing is we need to be gathering input from the public. So something we might want to think about, because I do think this education piece is really important, because I think there is a lack of knowledge out there broadly, right? And I'll just get, my favorite example is pretty much every time I go to the dump and somebody talks about property taxes, invariably I hear, we just need to reduce supervisory unions. That's going to save us a ton of money. And that is a myth that is like just so persistent out there, that we need to address some of these issues with some education. But I think going into a community forum and trying to do that may not be the best approach. And we might want to think about some more statewide focused sessions where, that are open to the public, et cetera. And those community sort of engagement sessions have a heavier focus on receiving information rather than pushing information.
Yeah, thanks, Oliver. Jay?
Yeah, just two quick things. So one, I want us to be careful about public comments during general meetings carrying too much weight. I'm much more interested in hearing what the public at large has to say in various parts of the state. Sometimes, and I haven't been a superintendent also for a long time, public comment is just advocating voices. It's the same people that are advocating for a specific position, whatever the position might be. I want to make sure we hear from the general public about what they say and think. And I also think the community forums, I agree with Oliver, we should be doing more listening than speaking at community forums. But I also think we might want to go to some of those community forums with some specific questions. Here are some things that have been floated out there. Bennington County, what do you think? Franklin County, what do you think? And having people respond specifically, if we have things like that they can specifically respond to get input from anybody who can attend those meetings.
Thanks, Jay. One of the things I'm thinking about just as this conversation is that there really shouldn't be a column, if we are using a framework, for a purpose, because I think what we're saying is those three, and maybe there end up being more principles, but those three are for all opportunities, is kind of what I'm hearing, for a couple of reasons. And I think actually it's a better statement of the conversation of the full commission. I don't think the commission was saying that some groups just need information. I think what they were saying is they do want to make sure that frankly, that everybody has the same baseline of the issues and the data, because that will inform engagement. And kind of to your point, Oliver, some of those comments that we hear don't necessarily come from a baseline of knowing the issue. It's more complex than that. And so if we just sort of strip out the idea that some groups get some kind of communication purpose and others don't, whatever the principles are or the purpose, it's all three of them or more if we end up with more.
I think I appreciate that, Megan. I think that's really important. And it's sort of the old, Stephen Covey, seek first to understand before being understood. So I feel like, if our disposition is first and foremost listening and learning, it's not to say that engaging and informing people isn't important. It's incredibly important, and that will further more discourse and more feedback. but I think that disposition has to first, we need to hear from our public. And so I agree that all three of those components are applicable to all stakeholders in all of the work. So, we don't want to say, okay, well, the UVM president gets, to, influence things, but the public doesn't. I think we need that sort of democratic and equitable engagement level. So I appreciate that tweak.
Yeah, and I think the commission is going to be ultimately the group that takes it all in and then decides what they do with it. I mean, that's at the end of the day. And frankly, part of the using the word partner and influence and sharing power, we know that our commission is not really fully representative of all the demographics in Vermont. And so there are many, and perhaps rightfully, will say, it's great, you're listening to us, but at the end of the day, you're the decision maker. So that engage piece is kind of meant to get at sharing power. We're not going to fix that perfectly. We're not. We are the commission that we are. And, I think we're doing the best that we can. And really, it's the job of the commission to untangle that and figure that out. Oliver, go ahead.
Maybe one sort of quick win is to think about some sort of a statewide survey that we could publish to gather sort of initial input and feedback from communities. And that way we're not sort of constrained by meeting locations, and we can at least, identify some, themes, issues, concerns, put some questions out there for people, and get a sense of, what the issues are statewide, what the issues are that are more sort of regionally focused. And then from there, that could then help inform, like, where's there a knowledge gap, right? How should we approach sort of sharing information? And then going back to Jay's comment, how can we be more sort of targeted about our engagement process within these communities, because we've already gathered some initial input.
Yeah, I've been thinking of some sort of method like that. And I wonder, I think it might be helpful to actually generate what are some of those questions. And here's why I asked that. Zoe has shared that the agency has this parallel work that I think we'll benefit from. We as a commission will benefit from it, but it is separate from this, right? So they are talking about a survey, and some of the questions in that survey are concerning. At least I know of two members of the field, because they ask for things like, what do you prioritize in education? And so people are worried, well, if the public says they don't prioritize educating students with disabilities, well, what do we do with that, right? So it makes me think that the questions in this survey that we ask are really important, because there's nothing more frustrating to the public or anyone to be asked a question and then out of the gate, it's a non-starter, right? Like we can't ask a question about whether or not Vermont prioritizes educating kids who have instructional needs, because we not only do we have to, but we will. Like, that's right. So what questions we ask, I'd almost want us to spend some time, not totally crafting them, but what is it we're asking the public, right? I think that's come up in meetings.
I'm going to hop in here, Megan, because I don't know the questions to ask the public, truthfully. And in order for a survey, which I like, Oliver, I think it's a great idea. I'm concerned. We met with Zoe a few weeks ago and had concerns and questions about her document. And I suggested at the time, and I'll say it again here, I think we need a professional survey group to do this. There are ways to do this scientifically, such that the results are then valid, and there are ways to do this and botch it and get just noise. And I'd rather get something that's scientifically valid that we then can rely on. And I do think we have some resources in the in the law that allows us to avail ourselves of some experts. And this would be one, because if we get this wrong, I think we'll just get noise, and that's not helpful to the commission, nor is it helpful to the state at all.
Yeah.
And
I
just
mean,
to add on, I'm sorry.
Nope,
I say
you
just
go.
to
You go, Jack.
just to add on to that. So Jeff and I and a couple other people met with Zoe on that very issue, because we looked at the survey, and having used surveys my whole career, it was one of the worst surveys I've ever seen in terms of its ability to elicit information that could be helpful. So I think the concept's good, but again, I think we'd have to be really careful how we did that. And do we want a quantitative survey, or do we want a qualitative survey, or do we want a combination of the two? And I don't know the answer to that. If, another thing we could do is something that's more open-ended in terms of a survey where people are just given their general thoughts. But again, I don't know how valuable that would be either. So I think we want to be careful with the survey. I do think the more transparent we can be and the more we can get into the communities and get feedback, the better. And I want to go back to Oliver's point of earlier, and I'm not sure how this would work, Megan, but I do wonder if we should really try to front load and get into the communities with the engagement piece earlier, even if it means maybe a couple of counties a month or something. And I really don't feel like I got the time to do that, but I'm willing to try to make the time if others are. And I wonder if we should really try to front load that stuff, because I'm more interested in what communities really are thinking, so that we can build off of that. If we go across the state and we find out that the majority of communities really think we should be looking at X, well, then we better have a really good reason if we're not going to look at X, whatever X might be.
John, go ahead, and then I have a thought about this idea of
Go ahead,
when.
Megan. Yeah, go ahead. That's fine.
Well, I think I both agree with the idea that there's going to be differences in what a community can provide input on based on when their forum is. I also think we could do that. We could take steps to doing that better by being really recursive and like iterative in what we're doing, so that there's always an education component. Then there's going to be an education component of like what's been done between. So I'll use an example. So let's say one community has a March meeting and one community has a December input meeting. All of them get some baseline information. All of them get an opportunity to react to some basic set of questions. But also the March group would have the benefit of anything that we've learned or proposed or drafted. And you're right, the December one won't. But I struggle a little bit with the idea. I don't want to set up a situation where counties or communities think we orchestrated this based on when we scheduled them. And I say that partially because a lot of, at least the scheduling of the commission meetings, is going to have a little bit to do with pure logistics. The other thing that is on my mind that I just want to put out there, because I don't have a good solution to it, is this kind of goes back to what does the commission do with the feedback and what questions we ask. We have people in our communities who will say it does not matter what education costs. It's really important and we just need to do it. We have people in our communities who say education is too expensive and it does not matter what you might like to do. You just need to lower our property taxes. And probably some variations in between. But my worry is that we are, how much time and energy do we spend? I'm not sure what will really be deeply generated in terms of suggestions that are going to vary that much from community to community. And that doesn't mean we don't still ask the questions, but I think for me, that just means what questions are we asking? Because we know as a commission, we have to come in with cost containment strategies, period. So we know that already. We also know we have to come in with quality recommendations, like how do we, right? So I don't know, I'm kind of belaboring the point, but the questions are really important. And this perhaps reinforces this idea of, I think we need outside expertise, not just in survey design, but in engagement design, because I also don't want to miss the equity piece. We are all, the group of us, even just on this subcommittee, are representative of a demographic perspective and not everyone. So I would like some help with that for sure. John and then Oliver.
Great, thanks. I would kind of bounce back, but there's several things that you said that also gave me some other thoughts that I can also hold on to. I guess I was, the whole question about how much do we dovetail or collaborate with the secretary's work. I see there's a value to that in some sense, but I also see a pitfall in doing that. I worry about that. And it's not, I don't say that in any way to be disrespectful to Zoe and the important work that she's doing. It's just the commission is the commission, right? And the secretary has a role on the commission, but I don't want to be perceived as we're now an extension of the agency or an extension of the administration. And so I think, again, we have to be mindful of that. So I know she's going through a process of listening and going around, and I don't necessarily feel that co-opting that or piggybacking those meetings is the best thing for us. And the same thing with a survey. If she has a survey, that's her survey. I think our survey has to be the commission survey. So I just wanted to put that out there as a concern in terms of our work moving forward. And back, I might as well get it out there before I forget it. The whole need for expertise, there's no question. This is really complicated work. And there's some really great people in our state that provide some great facilitation and work around community engagement. And I do think the sooner the better that we initiate a process for, tapping into that. And this is not to preload this, but, there are people like Sue McCormick out there, right? And the Creative Discourse Group, right, that has done a lot of work with an equity lens. And I think, there are other folks that do that too, but I just think, getting that kind of support. And I also want to make sure, I throw this out there now, is that when we're thinking of equity, it's not just about racial and ethnic and gender issue equity. We have to be thinking about socioeconomic equity. And I think that's sometimes lost in these conversations. So, the full spectrum of equity. And I think that's why, defining those aspects, right, as a whole commission are really important for us. So I know that's a lot. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Oliver?
Yeah, so a couple of thoughts just back on the survey, and Megan, I couldn't agree more. The questions are really important, and no doubt about it. We need outside expertise to help with that. I do. When I just want to be clear, when I was suggesting a survey, I didn't mean to imply that it would be really a quantitative survey. In my mind, maybe some demographic information about the respondents, but otherwise, I think it really needs to be open-ended, because it's the minute you start getting into something like rate this or score this, you're guiding people around, and the purpose here is really to gather input. And if we're only truly gathering input if we're allowing people to speak in their own voice about their own issues. So I think that's going to be really important. I sort of like Jay's idea of trying to front load a lot of conversations, but I just worry it's a heavy lift, which is why I think we can do it more efficiently with some sort of a statewide survey and based, we can, that data can be analyzed. We can kind of group things into different themes and then figure out sort of a targeted, meaningful engagement process following that. And then finally, I really want to also underscore John's point about socioeconomic equity, because I think one of the challenges out there always in these processes is, those communities, those populations on the lower end of the socioeconomic spectrum are typically not engaged in efforts like this. I mean, let's just call it what it is. That's the reality. And, ultimately it's the students in those communities who are underrepresented. So I don't have any magic solutions there, but I just want to call that out.
Oh, go ahead, Jeff.
Just a quick thought on that. I could not agree more, Oliver and John. And I'd add too, and John, I know I'm probably singing from your hymnal here, but rural versus urban. I know that, Chittenden County is rural compared to any other place in the country, but for Vermont, it is our urban setting, and the urban rural divide is real as well, socioeconomic and race, and so all those. Just adding that.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if we might spend some time on fleshing out the expertise that we might need to bring into this, because what I know is we're going to have to put out an RFP in order to access the funding that's available to us. I don't think it has to take as long as sometimes state processes do, but the basic RFP concept is going to have to happen. I just started with a couple of bullets. I think we need to flesh them out based on this conversation, because my observation would be we want help not just with facilitation, but actually with the development of this, and that we can present a perhaps more skeleton version of this to the group, and really help and I need to use better words, not the group, the commission, the full commission, kind of affirm the bulleted expertise points. It does not mean that we can't do anything related to engagement until we get a consultant, because that will feel frustrating too. But I want to make sure we're on the right track, and I'd rather get someone in relatively quickly. Can we take a few minutes to talk about like who we might, not who, what we need?
Yeah, I'm just going to clarify. So we're talking about specific type of attributes. We're not saying Josie Smith from Heinsberg.
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean,
hope
at
there's no
some
Josie
point,
Smith from Heinsberg interested. If there is, I apologize I don't know any Josie Smiths. So.
Well, once
Yeah.
we have a list, if folks have contacts, we all do. We've all worked with organizations. We can certainly invite those organizations to respond. So yeah, I mean, both eventually, but yeah, right now. So we have talked about equity. I agree with everyone about equity writ large, right? It's about surfacing the voices that are not normally at this table. And that's from many marginalized identities. We want to make sure we're leveraging our strategies. So we want someone who actually knows, well, if you're trying to get this audience, you want a focus group. If you're trying to get this audience, you want this. We do want them to be able to facilitate. What else?
So I'll just go first, and then I'll be quiet for a minute. I think we want someone who has a pretty good understanding of the public education landscape in Vermont, understands how public schools and private schools work in Vermont, those types of things, but not someone who's going to be seen as an advocate for, one thing or another. Somebody who's got really good general knowledge, really strong facilitator skills, and is going to be really adept at helping draw out thinking from the general public, and helping them to understand in a two-way facet. One, whatever types of recommendations that we as a commission end up making to the General Assembly, and two, providing us with information from the public that will inform those recommendations. So I think that's really key. So I wouldn't want somebody who, has a history of supporting consolidation of schools, or has a history of supporting non-consolidation of schools, or has a history of X or Y. If at all possible, it would be somebody who has a general understanding of how that all works, but who's a really good facilitator and can really help draw out information from the public writ large.
Yep. Oliver?
So I guess I just want to express, I think it's going to be very, very difficult. I think, first of all, I agree with Jay. I think it's important to find somebody who is who is perceived to be neutral and not have, not coming in with a perspective on any of these issues. The reality, though, is it's going to be near on impossible to find somebody who also has expertise in Vermont's education landscape. That's just the reality. So I think decision point number one for us is what do we prioritize? Somebody who is truly sort of neutral and disinterested, or somebody who is bringing some expertise to the table.
Yeah, my perspective is this is about communication and engagement, and I'd rather have someone who's expert in that because they engage people on multiple topics. Jeff.
I tend to agree, Oliver and Jay. I'm not sure deep or even superficial knowledge of Vermont's education landscape is as important as somebody knowledgeable about how and perceived as a fair player who has more knowledge about how to engage groups, conduct a survey, and all of that. I think we're going to be I agree, Oliver. We will be incredibly hard pressed to find somebody in state knowledgeable about Vermont who can be perceived as a fair player and have that expertise. Maybe I'm wrong. I could be surprised, but
No, I'll concede that. I'll definitely concede that. I think the key is to have a really good facilitator. I just want to make sure it's somebody who has a general knowledge of how to Vermont demographics and can work with all Vermont communities. But I think Oliver
Yeah.
and Jeff, your points are well taken.
But I think that is slightly different than knowledge of Vermont education. So Jay, I think you're right that it's not about Vermont so much as rural, urban, population center versus, right? So I do think that's an actual, that is a bullet, like an understanding of doing community engagement in the greater Boston area is different than doing community engagement in Vermont. And that's real. I agree. I don't know that we would get the education. I don't think we'll find someone who also has education expertise, but knowledge of, I don't want to say knowledge of Vermont because Vermont is also guilty of being myopic about itself. But knowledge about the type of state that we are is reasonable.
Yeah, I think process is most important. Somebody that's a skilled facilitator, skilled at designing surveys, skilled at reaching, marginalized populations. That's the most important thing. And I think we can provide the guidance around, the education landscape. That's I think our charge. So I just would say the sooner we can start to, craft an RFP and get it, I assume that has to go before the full commission or be blessed by them. But if we can get that, maybe even by the 9th, I don't know if that's possible, so that gets in the pipeline to move forward.
I've been thinking about that, John. I do think we could. Here's what I'm trying to do is figure out how we also, how I would get feedback from all of you before presenting it on the 9th without running afoul of open meeting law. And I think the way to do that is I can craft RFP type language with what we've discussed here, distribute it to you all. You can give me, just me, your input and feedback. I can take a stab at making changes, and then we'll have live conversation about a draft on the 9th. So it's feeling like a draft, what this committee would be presenting to the commission is potentially a draft RFP. I still think we could make some conceptual edits to this, some of which we've talked about. We're not separating out purpose per group, but I think it's instructive for them to see all the groups the law requires us to engage with, even if we're not yet talking about how, but I think it's important for them to know the magnitude. I think that one of the things we've discovered is we want community engagement opportunities, but that rotate geographically, and we want a statewide survey. We want help developing it, but we have kind of landed on we want a survey. So I think that could be added to this. So, another note that I took is I think an ask of the commission, not to bring it to us on the 9th, but an ask of the commission is most commission members are there representing a constituency. So they should be able to say, like Jeff, you would be able to say, here are my ideas for how I'm engaging the Vermont NEA or teachers. And Jay, you might have, those won't be the only things we do, but they are important things. So I think we could have an ask of the commission. I also think that this is kind of related to that, actually. I do think it would be helpful to have at least common framing or informational baseline, so that when you do go out, we're all coming out with roughly the same current reality. We may need some help developing that. I'm kind of rambling now, but I think what I could do is send to you both an updated version of this that is perhaps much more general at the moment, and a draft RFP. We'll get it. I'll edit as much as I can until it has to go out to the full commission. Everything else we can just discuss there. I'm going to pause to hear thoughts on that.
I'm happy to take a look at that. Yes, I think that's moving us in the right direction.
I
Yes,
think
we'll
like
stop there.
with so much of this work, we're trying to find the right pace, right? So, one of my most influential mentors had been a Latin teacher, and he always used the phrase "festina lente," make haste slowly. And so, not that I have any Latin, myself, but I do feel like, how do we, keep the things moving forward? But at the same time, the most important thing is we get it right. Then it's not about getting it done. So, sure, I'm suggesting that we bring something forward on the 9th. If that's not practical, that's okay. We can wait until the next month, right? And so we just also know that, if we're looking at sort of a month-to-month cadence of everything, keeping the ball moving down the field, we just need to keep things progressing, right? So I think it's, we're all trying to find that balance of, we want to move things forward. There is some timelines that we have to adhere to because of some of the constraints of the law. But I also want to make sure that we're being thoughtful as a committee, but we also truly give the commission time to give us feedback and to influence the final document. I don't anticipate or don't expect that we just bring something that they rubber stamp, because I don't expect the same thing from the finance committee. All right. I want to be able to ask questions of the finance committee and push back on the finance committee, on certain things. So I think it's okay that this will be an iterative process, and we bring something forward. It may not be done on the 9th, right? People might just say, no, we need more time, and that's okay. We'll need more time.
Yeah, I agree with that. I am in a slightly nuanced way, which is we do have some deadlines in the law, that September 15th one. However, I'm not concerned about that deadline, because my sense from talking to the legislators who wrote the law, they just want to know that we have organized around. So whatever version of a draft we have, even if it is very drafty, that's going to satisfy that. So I'm not really worried about that. Yeah. That's basically what I'm saying. It's okay. I do think we need something tangible to bring to the 9th, and they will either affirm, but even if they affirm with edits or affirm the concept and not the document, I think that'll be enough to satisfy. That's my sense. Jeff.
Well, we haven't heard from Oliver and Jay, so I don't know if they have input as to your specific question, but I'd like to take us in a slightly related but different direction. So I'll pause and give them the opportunity.
Go ahead.
I'm fine.
Okay. Go ahead,
So
Jeff.
my question is this: is that I go to the law, and it says the commission shall seek input from and collaborate with key stakeholders, which you've laid out in the I'll call it the framework. Thank you, Oliver. I think that was the word you used. And then it lists all these groups, the president of UVM, chancellor of state colleges, et cetera. Is this part of our charge today to outline to the commission? We should, I see that. I read that a while ago and thought, okay, that's more than one meeting, right? Instead of just one and done with the UVM president, even though it's an interim at this point, but somebody should come in, have a conversation with us as a commission, and then we go about our other work, and they invite them back maybe 3, 4, 5 months down the road or something like that. So I was thinking of this, I'd love to hear from these folks sooner rather than later as a commission member. and hear what they have to say right now, in October, November, possibly. I don't know what their schedules are. And the other thing I'll add is if we go around and my organization has fall meetings every year. I know Sue Suglowski has something similar at the VSBA. Scheduling those is a major nightmare. And we start in March and we just finished in July, locations and all the details that go into these things. And so I think we ought to be trying to schedule the 14 meetings around the state. And I think it's not too silly to think, okay, let's look at January, February, even though weather may hamper us. It's going to be very difficult to schedule those around the state. And I think we ought to just lay that out as a marker for the commission. This is what we're thinking. February, I don't pick a date. February 14th, Jay.
Yeah, right. So clarifying question on that, Jeff. I like how you're thinking. I agree. This is this is really a question about the change in law last year. So if we host a meeting in February, and let's say we host it in Brattleboro somewhere, okay? With the quorum rule of this committee, we have to have an on-site spot in Brattleboro. Is that correct or not correct?
So I can take that because I
Okay.
also want to kind of insert a couple of things. The law still requires the commission meetings themselves to rotate around the state. So even if we choose to have separate and more clustered engagement opportunities, it's not going to preclude the fact that the full commission still has to rotate. Our thought, and I still think it's useful, is that if it makes sense to piggyback those two things and have an engagement session on the same day as a commission meeting, great. And if it doesn't work, that's fine too. Like it's a potential benefit. It doesn't have to happen, but we will still hold commission meetings in every county. The question about, like, let's say it's February and there is a provision in the law about what you could do if the roads, right, if you have to, all of our meetings will be hybrid, things like that. And I think that as we design, if we end up designing separate events that are related to commission work, if a quorum of the commission is there, it simply means we have to be aware of that. They have to be posted, warned, and we have to be careful about what decisions might be made. But if we're all present there, anyway, I think it is reasonably, we need to be on top of it, but I think that there are ways to accommodate. But I just wanted to be clear that we still, and this is actually can transition to something I wanted to make sure we talked about, is how starting the rotation among counties for just the commission meetings. Because actually, I should say one more thing. I think the consultant is going to help us with, I hope, the consultant will help us actually with where should these events take place, what should they be, when should they be, and I think we're not going to have that information fast enough to be able to at least schedule commission meetings. We have
Yeah,
a
and I'm
full
not,
commission.
I think I'm not disagreeing with anything you're saying, Megan. I think you're 100% right. I guess what I'm asking is more of a logistic question. If we have a meeting someplace in February and the roads are really bad and all the commission members decide to join online, my reading of the law, I thought, was that somebody had to be there in person for people. That's all I'm asking. So would
Yeah.
that mean, okay, so
What
say
we would-
it's, go ahead.
What we would probably do, Jay, because I've had a little bit of this conversation with AOE folks, once we schedule the commission meetings and they have locations, we are hoping that between agency staff or commission members, that we will find people close enough who could go to the physical location in the event of snow.
That's what I was asking. Thank you.
That would be the first plan A in the event of bad weather. There is also a provision in the law that actually does allow you to have it fully remote if you had to, but that would be sort of like the backup plan. So I think we'll be able to answer that question about commission meetings once we have the map of the location. John, and then I want to ask my question about September 9th.
Yeah, and this is part of, I think, my thinking about this backward design is that, when we think about the amount of months we have that the commission will meet and when we have to have a plan by next October, right? It's going to be open for public comment. We only have so many months. And so we have 14, counties, right, that we have to get to, but we also have 14 public meetings, right? And so are we melding them together, or are we increasing the number of meetings? So we're going to meet more than once a month. And I just think we really got to give some thought to that sooner rather than later, because it's all of a sudden we're going to get to January, hire a consultant in January, and they're going to now start working on a plan, and we're going to get that improved in February. Now we only have 8 months right left to do this work. So I don't have a definitive answer, but I do think there's a value in at least a substantial amount of times combining the public meetings with the commission meetings, right? So if we meet from 1 to 4, take a break for an hour and a half, and then meet at 5:30 or 6 o'clock or something like that, I think that's doable. It's it's a lot for all of us, but I think it's doable. But I think given the fact that we've got so many meetings to do that, we only have so many opportunities. It's going to have to accelerate the number of meetings in a month at times.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Oliver, and then I'm going to move us forward.
Yeah, just an idea to think about for these public engagement sessions is, the law requires that the commission go out to all 14 counties, but we may want to think about maybe some public engagement sessions that are consolidated and around, and making sure we have good geographic representation, but maybe we don't need to hit all 14 counties with that, as long as we're being really intentional and thoughtful about how we group and organize those. And that might make this a little less daunting, and also would help solve the challenge of putting all those groups on sort of equitable footing in the timeline.
Yep. I'm going to suggest, so we're going to separate these two things. We need to affirm all the dates of our commission meetings and the locations, and set into motion the landing of the locations, because we have to do that anyway. They have to rotate. As we bring on board a consultant, they will help us either plan those parallel conversations, or, and maybe it's these additional regional things. My suggestion, so we have a meeting on September 9th. I had thought about, okay, what could we find a location in a county to host us, to start ticking off that like we've been in every county. And I don't want whatever county we pick for September 9th, which is only really 2 weeks away, it's a week and a half. I don't want that county to think, oh, we were rushed. We're not going to be able to plan a community input opportunity by September 9th. And if we host the commission meeting in a different county on the 9th, they are going to feel short-shrifted. I worry about them feeling short-shrifted. So my recommendation it's just a recommendation to all of you, is that September 9th be our last meeting in Washington County at the agency, like they have been. Sorry, I'm making my thumbs up go. The cadence of rotating around the state starts with our October meeting. So we give a longer tail for the agency folks to be able to land the locations. We still may be able on our own to plan an input session by October, or we still might decide to let the consultant come on board. But I guess my quick recommendation is September 9th be the last meeting that's at the on-site location is at the agency.
But then will just to play devil's advocate, won't the folks in Washington County feel short-shrifted?
I don't think it means we won't come back to Washington County. And I think we have to be really clear when we say that. And that's in the beginning of the meeting. Maybe we can also, I would love, actually, as a side note, we won't do it today, but this committee may want to have a volunteer summarize what we talk about every month and push it out as a press release. Kind of the way that a school board would have a board corner where a member volunteers just to write up what we talked about. I know we have meeting minutes and I know that they're posted, but this would be more publicly accessible. I'm not going to suggest that we make a decision about that, but that way things like this, like, hey, Washington County, don't worry, we are coming back to you in a more public way. We just don't have our feet under us yet, frankly. Okay, so folks are okay with September 9th?
Yep.
And this one is just, it'll be, because Maureen's going to have to just update the location for the rest of the commission. Okay, so then we will task the agency, and I'll, this is already on their radar, starting in October 9th to seek locations for commission meetings, so that we can at least bookmark those. And once we know what the October location is, this group, even without the benefit of an expert, we could probably take a stab at planning a parallel input session. We can talk about that at our next meeting. That okay for folks? Okay. So
yeah, I think given what John just said, thinking about the months that we have available to us is daunting. I would rather get started with something. If it's not perfect, we can always come back to that county if we need to.
Okay. So I think what I am bringing back to you all so that you can give me feedback individually is a draft RFP and a reframed and sort of more 10,000-foot framework. The goal is not to have it be perfect, but just have it reflect this conversation so that we can give it to the commission. I think what I will give you all for a deadline, I will try to turn it out quickly. We don't have a lot of time. We have a week. And we like to try to get the packet out to the commission the Thursday or Friday before. So, yeah, I guess it's kind of an impossibly quick turnaround, as I'm realizing. Because if I can turn this around to you by tomorrow and you could get your feedback to me by next Wednesday, then that's probably, and if you don't get me your feedback, it just means you'll bring your feedback to the full discussion on the 9th. I think that's okay. Just obviously don't reply all, just send it directly to me and I'll try to pull it together. And then we will affirm the location of the September 9th meeting is the Agency of Education. The October meeting falls on the 7th, and that will be the first one that we will start rotating. And I'll work with agency folks on starting to look at that. And if early month locations, that doesn't mean they've then missed it, even by October, it might be hard to pull off something really broad in terms of engagement. And that does not mean that that county missed its opportunity. We are checking one of the boxes, which is holding a meeting in every county. The other box is public input in every county. We're kind of separating the two out. If they merge, great, but we're not trying to do too much.
That makes a lot of sense. Good thinking.
Yes, thanks, everyone. One more quick logistic before I give folks a chance, if anyone in the public wants to comment, is we had loosely affirmed that the third Monday of every month would be held for committee meetings, which would put us at September 16th. Does this group want to meet again the morning of September 16th, this same time? Oh, actually, it might need to be the steering group. Let's just pick our time. We met first. We'll pick our time on the 16th. I think the steering group is also going to hold their meeting, and that only impacts me because I have to be at both. But do we want to meet? I
didn't know that we'd picked a date, Megan. So, but I'm fine with the 16th.
Well, what we had said at the end of the commission meeting is that full commission meetings would be the first Monday of the month, and the third Monday would be held for subcommittee meetings
I missed that. I
with some
apologize.
discretion by the
My
committee.
apologies.
That's okay.
Do we have to start that at 8:30? Is there any way we can start it earlier? I have a 9 o'clock high school meeting. I don't have to go to it. Mike runs them, but that'll be 2 Mondays a month that I don't see my high school principals.
Yeah.
We could start at 8.
8's fine.
And be done hopefully for 9, or even if I can leave by 9:30, I could still get the last half hour with the high school principals.
So how about we say
It's fine
Go
with me.
Okay. So Monday, the 16th from 8 to 9 will be this committee's next meeting.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you all. Okay. I think Claire, no, I don't mean to put you on, but this is the opportunity for public comment if there is any.
Oh, come on, Claire. I'm kidding.
For the record, that was Jeff that pressured, not me. Okay. I am not hearing any public comment. And so I believe our business is done. We have a next meeting scheduled and some to-dos. Motion to adjourn. All right. Great.
Bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thank you.
you,
Bye,
Megan.
everybody.
Appreciate
Take
it.
care.
Thank you, Megan. Yes.